so forth. We acknowledge the importance of all these forums and these validation, these agreements. But how you put this in terms of what the region has done so far to create an enabling environment for this whole advancement of food production and food security? How is the mean going on? You know, we've had startups with regard the agri-investment forum and so forth, and the call still for the region to look at utilizing Guyana and moving into these mega farms and all that. How would you say?
Well, I think that maybe, I don't know if you want to call it unfortunate or fortunate, but I think that the high food prices have brought agriculture to the forefront again. With the rising prices of fuel and also the rising prices of food, I think there are some concerns from our member states that something must be done and be done immediately. In fact, at the last quoted, the member states agree that we must have what we call a more proactive approach. In fact, they said that there is a crisis that is coming on us. We realize that the cost of food is not only related to fuel, but also to speculation of food at the food market, depreciation of the US dollar. We know also about the effects and impacts of climate change. Therefore, we were instructed that the Caricom response must be bold, innovative, and multi-sectoral, and that it must be effected through partnerships that include the private sector, regional institutions, and international development partners. In fact, on the 13th and 14th of June, FAO will be hosting a regional consultation meeting to deal with policy and programmatic approach to high food prices in the Caribbean, which CDB will co-sponsor at fora along with us, the Secretariat. But I think importantly, we have to ensure that we don't look at the traditional response of short term. I think it came out very clear that we need medium and long-term strategies that propose solutions, because the impact of high food prices will not go away. It is something that we will have to live with, so we have to come up with some proactive approaches to ensure that we'll be able to forecast and to have certain mechanisms in place to respond to these crises. So,
But yeah, you mentioned there how it has been brought to the fore again because of the high rising
yeah.
food prices. We know what happened a couple of years ago with cream and before, and it went on. So it's in that same vein. I'm sure work would have been done from Caricom level to advance this environment. Are we satisfied with how this environment will be advanced? Because here again, the heads are calling for this proactive, bold approach, and we've heard that call before.
Well, I think that what happened the last time was some short-term responses. For example, the reduction of CET on what they call some of the products that were important for the cost of living. Now we are taking a bit further and saying, besides the commodities that have significant weight on the consumer price index, we are also recommending that the CET should be looked at, for example, at agricultural inputs to reduce the cost of food production, not only in the production but even in the preparation and processing. So we want to look at how we can reduce the cost of production throughout the food chain, so that at the end of the day the consumer gets a better price, gets a commodity at a better price. Because definitely it is something that we have to look at. We also think that in terms of policy, the member states have to put certain policies in place that will not only protect the producer but also the consumer. And I think we always say it, but we need to ensure that there is a certain level of commitment and action taken into implementing policies already agreed to. We have the JAGDEO initiative, we have the Common Fisheries Policy now, we also have now the Regional Food and Nutrition Security Policy. And currently we are doing the Regional Food and Nutrition Security Action Plan. So I think that definitely there are a lot of actions. But I think something came out in this last meeting at Quoted too, which is that both Belize and Guyana reiterated the offer that land is available for increased production of food. So I think that this allows for two main concepts to do, which is cross-border investments. In other words, regional companies can be formed to produce in any one of these countries, including Suriname, and also that it allows for cross-border investments, but also the production integration concept where you can produce in one country, take it to another country to process, looking at advantages. And in fact, at this meeting, some of the ministers made it very clear that we have to think outside the box. We have to look for more innovative approaches to how we will solve this problem. And I think that this is something that we really have to take into consideration. It is no longer just national food security, but the regional food security that must be taken into consideration.
But Mr. Sergio, you spoke pointedly there to the issue and the whole need for investments. I mean, outside of the Caricom Secretariat, which has the mandate to deal with policy and validation and all this thing, who else need to come on board? I think I've heard calls about the private sector.
Right.
That same quoted meeting. Is the private sector really pulling the role? One of my concerns too is that you would have these quoted meetings, and I don't think I see private sector representatives there, even our own local private sector chairman and so forth. Are we really involving the private sector, or are we just giving lip service to their involvement?
Well, I think at this regional fora, we not only are bringing the private sector, but we are also bringing the financing institutions. We are bringing CDB, we're inviting the EU, we're inviting the World Bank. I think that at this meeting in Trinidad on the 13th and 14th of June, the idea is that we have to ensure that it is not only the governments or the public sector, but that we bring the private sector on board. And we also not only bring the private sector, but bring the financing institutions, because they have to be a part of the process. And I think that we expect great things to happen. And you're right, I think that in fact, one of the things that we will do with FAO after the completion of the Regional Food and Nutrition Security Action Plan is to hold a donor conference where we will propose certain activities that are critical to the region and see where we can mobilize resources, including getting better partnerships with the private sector. I think you hit it. This is like a stool where you have three legs, and without one of the legs, the stool will fall over, which is what we call a tripartite approach, which is government, private sector, and the international development partners.
And from that would spring these cross-border investments, right, and all
the production integration. I think that is the key and the answer in reality.
Mm-hmm. How could we involve the farmers? You know, for example, Guyana, and this ties into the whole JAGDIM initiative on agriculture, and Guyana is already playing a key role in food production. How can we involve the farmers, let's say from Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, you know, to be this focused and understanding what is going on here and their role?
I think, Paul, you asked a right question. In fact, for July, I think we are planning from about the 22nd to the 26th, if I'm not mistaken. We'll have a farmers forum right here in Guyana, where we have CAFAN, which is the Caribbean Farmers Network. And the idea is to plan production to meet the food needs. And this will be based on the results of the Regional Food and Nutrition Security Action Plan too, because Quartet has identified some priority commodities. So the idea here is to link the small farmer to the markets based on the needs of the region. So if you notice, everything is coming together. In fact, that workshop will be held here, so definitely we'll be invited to attend. And I think that you're right. We have to bring the small farmer to be a more active player.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we addressed the two forums effectively. The first one coming up. Have we addressed the second one?
Yes.
We addressed the second. Anything else we need to touch on? I know it's a lot of stuff. I don't want to get it too jumbled up. because we still got to get the message out to the ordinary
I, I told you that this is the one for the workshop.
right. This whole CAPSA operationalization, you want to tell me a little bit about this formation, this whole functioning, especially in the center of this whole food crisis situation?
Well, it's not really to just deal with the food crisis. I think CAFSA is, as the name mentions, agriculture health and food safety. For us, agricultural health is one, dealing with plant diseases and then the livestock diseases, but we also look at the concept of the keeping out disease that we don't have in the region through what we call quarantine. And then we want to deal with the food safety issues, which will then look at food in its entirety to ensure that it doesn't contain that it is not contaminated by pesticides or including pests and diseases. I think you know that in the US, for example, anytime they find E. coli or salmonella on certain products, they ban it and they recall it. So we have to develop that capacity to ensure that the food is safe. It means that that is at the regional level. So how do you link to member states? Then we have to try to develop the capacity within member states to be able to carry out these functions. Also, there are certain things that can be done at the regional levels because you will need labs, for example. So I don't think that it is beneficial for everybody to have an individual lab, but rather trying to have a regional approaches to some of these things. Therefore, we think that CAFSA has a very, very vital role to play. Now, the operationalization, we intend to seek assistance. It will require some investments from member states. It will require investments from our international development partners. And I think also the private sector has a very important role to play because some of these services has to be cost recovery. At the end of the day, the producer or the seller needs a certificate of SPS certificate that says this is food safe. But then it requires certain services to be rendered. So it will have to have a little cost because, again, if you want to make it sustainable, then certain services will have to have a cost. I think that it will either be done at the member state level or certain services will be offered at the regional level. But I think that those discussions will occur as time proceeds. Like right now we'll have the validation workshop. Then when we move to operationalizing, I think then the discussion will reach to that level where member states will make a decision on how best to approach it.
Beautiful. Finally, maybe we can touch transportation.